All right, as I said on late Tuesday afternoon, the announcement from the government on what they hope will be significant and radical reorganisation of New Zealand local government. And you would have heard my editorial this morning saying that they didn't go far enough and that they should have immediately moved to unitary authorities and abolished regional councils, and they could have done that. But they've ended up in this strange and hybrid halfway house. Although our next guest, is in actual fact the kind of model that you would have thought that they would have picked up and said, listen, it works there, why wouldn't it work everywhere else? The other issue, of course, is will this inevitably lead to the reorganisation of local government in this country? I've suggested we might eventually end up with maybe 15, 16 in this country if everything goes there, but why again you wouldn't just push the button and go is beyond me as well. But to talk about what the future of local government might look like, because they are sort of the future, the Mayor of Nelson joins us, Nick Smith. Nick, welcome to the show. Thanks for giving up your time this morning. I know you've stepped out of a meeting for us, so I appreciate it.
Good to be on the program, and a fascinating topic.
It is indeed. Listen, you are the future of local government. Unitary authorities in your neck of the woods, Nick, have been going since the early 90s. I'm interested in if they work for you, why aren't they the model for the rest of New Zealand?
Well, I think you're on the money. We got rid of the Nelson Marlborough Regional Council 30 years ago, and Marlborough, Nelson, and Tasman have been able to deliver good improvements in the environment, has been able to deliver good services for the public. And all of the fears that are put up about, well, what would happen if you didn't have regional councils has not proved to be correct.
Mm.
I think it's worthwhile, Michael, just to reflect on the history. Look, our parliament and our councils are really important democratic institutions, and they date back to the earliest times of New Zealand, back in the 19th century. The regional councils were added by Sir Geoffrey Palmer as part of those massive reforms in the Rogernomics era. And it was all tied to the Resource Management Act. And the one thing I have to really give credit to the government for is that there's been all these conversations going on about RMA reform, about changes in Three Waters, about changes to local government, but they haven't been brought together. And just in the same way that the regional councils were created primarily to deliver on the RMA, that now that they're having a major rethink of the RMA, it is absolutely right and proper to have a rethink about the regional councils.
Okay. Now you also see, and this is the next step, it seems to me. I think we need to move quicker rather than slower on this issue, and I'll be making a submission to that effect myself. But
Yep.
you also see this, and this is the step after that, as inevitably the move towards amalgamation of existing district and city councils in regions as well. You're talking about
Yeah,
Nelson
that's a
and
big
Tasman.
conversation. I think the government's actually been quite creative and clever in the way in which they're doing that, Michael. There's always going to be huge resistance in New Zealand to Big Brother government coming down and saying, your council will look like this. And it doesn't matter whether it's in New Zealand or Australia or the UK, it's always controversial. If we go back to the big Bassett reforms, which was when those changes were made in the 1980s, it was done that way. Now, what the government's done here is to say, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to put the mayors on the regional council, put them in charge of it, and then require them within 2 years to come up with a reorganisation plan. I actually think it's a pretty good approach. The
No,
first
I
thing
don't.
it does,
No, listen,
well,
listen,
let me
mate. I
tell
mean,
you
the
why I
problem is
think,
but mayors don't know anything. You know something about regional council because you've got regional responsibilities. Mayors don't. For many mayors, they're struggling who've just been elected to look after their own role. Why would they
yeah,
suddenly know anything about regional councils and be able to provide better governance than those that are already there?
well, let me give you an alternative view. Actually, this is a big, complicated reform, and it's really important for New Zealand that you get it right. And it's not the same in Southland or West Coast or Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, or Waikato. It does actually vary around
It
different
does.
parts of the country.
mm.
And I actually think when you get those mayors together, whether it be on the West Coast, where you've got the Westland Council, the Grey Council, Buller, as well as a regional council, the first thing you do with this change is you get rid of the silly patch protection that goes on between regional councils. It's a bit difficult if you're the mayor sitting on the regional council to be saying that the regional council is hopeless. Well, you're on the board, fix it. You're going to get away from the patch protection and actually have an honest conversation about what is the form of local government that's going to best work for
What
Southland,
do
the
you
West
mean by
Coast, the
patch
Wairarapa,
protection, Nick?
or Wellington.
Can you
Well,
give
the
me an
patch
example of what you
protection is
mean?
that, yeah, I do. What I mean by patch protection is that regional councils say, oh, this issue about, say, civil defence. We're the guys that should be doing the civil defence because we manage the rivers and the big rivers damages
Well, no,
around
that they're
the
given that
flood.
responsibility by the government. It's the government that gave them
Well, no,
responsibility
it's
to
not
do
as
so.
clear as that. It's not as
Yes, it
clear as
is.
that. So it is absolutely clear. It is absolutely clear that they have responsibility at the moment, Michael, for the stock banks, but not around the civil defence issues that arise from that. And so you end up with the silly situation in the Hawke's Bay where during Cyclone Gabriel, you had the two lots of councils at war with each other. And so what I'm saying in putting the mayors on the regional council, at the governance end, you're going to get the incentives right for those regional council staff and the local council staff to bang their heads together and to get things done more sensibly. But equally, in looking forward about what sort of structure would be the right for the Hawke's Bay or the West Coast or these areas, actually having the elected representatives common to both will end up in a more sensible outcome.
I'm struggling here. If you're talking about patch, that's nonsense, Nick. If you're talking about patch protection, then you're going to have district councils potentially versus city councils, and what they think is the best plan for them, trying to manage a regional authority. I mean, they certainly know what the best place for them is, but why would you then have a regional view in which a council is going to say, well, this will suit us, and yet you expect them not to have that view when they look at the region? They'll do what's in their best interest, surely, if we're talking about patch protection when it comes to managing the regional asset.
That may be true, Michael, but I tell you, the incentives of the government's proposed structure changes things significantly. So you take in Canterbury, you're going to have those 10 mayors around the table giving the oversight of the Canterbury Regional Council. Now, the constitution and the way the government set it up is, of course, Christchurch could outvote the other areas completely on population. But what they're saying is that you need to get both a majority of the 10 mayors and a majority by population to be able to advance reform. Now, I think that's actually really smart.
But
You are
why
going to
wouldn't they?
force those
But if it's so
mayors,
smart, Nick, why didn't they move to a unitary council for Canterbury? And then you could have, in actual
because it's
fact,
not. Well, I think that would. I personally think that would be the wrong answer for Canterbury. And I also think that you actually need to take the Canterbury community with you. Do I think Christchurch and Timaru should be in the same local authority? No,
no,
I don't.
no, no. But
And
then
so, so, so
but
I
each of
think
them could be a unitary
you are.
council
I
like
don't agree
Nelson and
with you.
Marlborough are, couldn't they?
That's right. But I would say that South Canterbury, centred around Timaru, has got far more in common with a Marlborough or Nelson than does the Mega. I don't agree with
Mm, mm,
you
mm.
that
No,
the
no, no,
right
no, no.
answer
Listen,
out
that's
of this
fine.
reform
That's fine.
is
But you could
simply
have one
13 or
Christchurch
16 councils.
council, and then you could have a series of other unitary councils as well. I mean, that's fine. But the
Yes, you
point
would.
is,
And you,
yeah.
and you have a history of representation in Hawke's Bay. I think that's in areas like Hawke's Bay and Southland. Canterbury is very complicated. They need to take their time. I tell you why Canterbury is so complicated. The most important issues that are affected by this debate is about how you manage water. 70% of New Zealand's irrigation is in Canterbury. Those big river systems are absolutely vital to New Zealand's energy interests around those big storage dams. They're going to have to think very carefully about how they reform local government in this area. And I think the process of which they're setting up gives the opportunity to do that. I think it would be too simple and a balls up to take your approach and just big bang, we're going to have
No,
16
no, Nick,
unitary councils.
sorry, mate, you're barking. If Christchurch City Council is going to be sitting controlling those regional assets, they don't have any vested interest in them. Christchurch City, Okay, so you're asking the Mayor of Christchurch City to then look after the regional assets you've just talked about, for example, of the river systems coming out of the Tekapo and the Pukaki and the Mackenzie, for example. Um,
But
Now
what's going to happen under this
they are
model
going to be
is
on the
not just
same
the Mayor of
committee as the Mayor of Mackenzie, as the Mayor of Waimati, as the
correct?
Mayor of Timaru. Yeah?
Yes. And I tell you, there's actually a very strong history in this. Back when I was an environment minister and Environment Canterbury got itself into all sorts of trouble, it was actually the mayoral form and the Canterbury water management strategy that was developed by those 10 mayors. There is a strong history of mayors actually taking a pretty sensible approach around how we manage some of these regional issues. Another classic example would be the balls up over the buses in Wellington that Wellingtonians refer to as the butastrophe. Now, what you've got there again is a division and patch protection going on around public transport between the regional council and the city council. This reform has a capacity to be able to deliver a more sensible
Yeah, but
structure
again,
for delivering public
is that the
transport.
problem of the regional council? I mean, at the end of the day, regional councils, whether they want it or not, were given responsibility for public transport in this country. Now, it wasn't a natural
No,
fit,
that
as you're
Michael,
probably aware.
Michael, that is not completely true.
Yes,
Because
it
while
is
it is
completely true,
true,
Nick. Of course it is. What do you know about regional council then?
no.
The public
Well,
transport
let me talk to you.
operations
Let me
in
talk to you on
Dunedin, in
buses.
Otago, Nick, the public operations
Yes.
transport in Dunedin are run for Dunedin and Queenstown. They are the responsibility statutorily of the regional council of. We wouldn't want our
No,
buses. We'd love to give them to Queenstown or to Dunedin, but we are
no,
required
that you're
by the
not.
law to have that policy.
Michael, you're not telling the full story.
Yes,
The
I
the
am telling the
city
full story,
council,
Nick. You just don't understand the issue.
no, and the city councils have responsibility for determining the bus stops, for maintaining the roads, and where it's gone to custard in Wellington is that the roads and the bus stops and the shelters have not been coordinated with the Wellington Regional Council. That is, there are parts of the public transport system that are still run by the city councils, and it's the interaction between the two of those, Michael, that does not work well
But
under the
why
current
would you
system.
throw the baby out with the bathwater? Why wouldn't you just say, okay, and as makes common sense, Nick, give the buses to the cities in which they operate or into the regions that they operate? Why? I mean, isn't rather than throw out
Yeah.
everything? I mean, that's a classic case, really,
Well,
of
no,
that's the
nobody's,
government's fault
people
for
are not
making that
proposing.
division.
Oh, yes, that's fair. And what the very question that's being asked with these reforms is, can you reorganise local government so that you can do a better job of managing things like water, like buses, like coastal management, and the other things that regional councils do? And my view is that you're absolutely right. I don't blame the regional councils or the district councils for that messiness around public transport. Blame the legislators and look at reform. And that's exactly what is taking place. And I think there is the potential to get a better answer as to how things like public transport are managed, Michael.
Okay, I'll put it the other way up front. You see, I mean, in a funny sort of way, you're quite lucky in the sense that the Nelson region, for which you have two district councils, Nelson and Tasman, shares so many similarities. So you can share services across that area of a regional nature and obviously have a great deal of cooperation between your two councils within the one essentially community, yeah? But in larger areas,
I
and
would
I'm thinking of,
I would
sorry,
merge
carry
them
on.
tomorrow. I think
Sorry?
the situation, while these reforms that the government has announced are going to have the biggest impact on those areas that have a regional council, it is my view that Nelson and Tasman would be better served by a single council.
Why hasn't there been one up until now?
Because the process of making change is so damn difficult. And right across the country, if you look in the last 15 years, have councils ever had a process by which they can reform? You had Fran Wild have a crack at trying to reform local government in Wellington. She's a very capable political leader from both a parliamentary and council background. She failed. She couldn't do it. The structure didn't work. What the government is proposing is changing how local reorganisations occur. And I think the model that they've come up with will deliver meaningful and good change.
How will they do that, Nick? I'm sorry, I can't see that. Again, I think this is a botched reform.
Well, let's be clear
They,
about
they needed
what
to
the
move
proposal is.
quicker in this
The
area.
proposal,
Can I give an example? The local
well,
government commission will remain. Yeah?
it's not going to have a significant role under the government proposals of how reorganisations occur.
Well, that's not in the 30-page document that I read.
Well, what significant role do you see the local government commission having in
Oh, listen,
the
I don't
two
think it should
years
exist,
that the
Nick.
new,
But that's not the point. The point that I'm just trying to say is
right?
I don't understand why the government didn't just move towards the model that it already had, Nick, which was unitary authorities, and Gisborne since 1989, you guys since the 90s, Auckland since 2009. Why do you think that they
And
ended up
my
in this sort
view
of
is
halfway house?
that is a fair view, and the question then is how do you do that? I think the structure they've set up with this proposed reform provides them with a mechanism to be able to do that, because I have the view that the current mechanisms to do that through the local government commission are too hard. Michael, I'm going to have to go back to
Okay, all right.
chairing
Nice to
our
talk to you,
council.
Nick. Yep. Thank you
I
very
love
much
you
for
to talk
spending
to
your
you
time with
too.
us.
Look forward to the debate.
Yep, yep. Fair enough. Thank you. Nick Smith, the Mayor of Tasman. Sorry, Nelson. What am I talking about? Well, it could be Tasman Nelson, actually. What would you call that area if they were merged?